Welcome back to another episode of Coaching with the Bible. This is episode 162, season 4, episode 2, the portion of the week, the second portion in the first book of the 5 books of Moses, portion known as Noah. This week is the story of Noah and the ark. And our topic this week is on being the light. Typically speaking, over the first 160 weeks or so, we really delved into, I would say, less spiritual types of subjects. And last week, we talked about moral clarity. We stepped into sort of a different domain in the sense that it wasn't specifically a coaching type of subject, and nor is this week's. We'll get back to that at some point in the near future, I do hope. But for the moment, last week and this week and maybe even next week, who knows, give me a chance perhaps to just share. We're under 2 weeks since the massacre that took place here in Israel, and we sit in a moment where the specter of war is drawing ever closer. I don't think anybody would be surprised to hear me say that. But it's really the truth right now. And I would say that it's a scary moment. I don't think there's any other way to say that. And the reason why I wanted to spend time today talking about spreading light and being the light, which I think is not typically a term or a language that I normally use, but I think is actually one that's actually fairly appropriate here this week, is because there is so much darkness right now around us that even for a fleeting moment, when this all broke 2 weeks ago, for a few days, the world seemed to be legitimately supportive of the Jewish people and the people of Israel. That seems to have dissipated rather quickly. Even though you have sort of major powers still supporting, and we'll come back to that, it definitely feels like a tide has turned. And it's painful to watch and hurtful to live through. And it can bring you down. And the darkness that comes with it is exceptionally heavy. It's sort of soul-sucking. And you get sort of wrapped in it and you get pulled down in it, and you, like, how do you get out of it? And it's so hard, and it's so much. There's so much darkness. The Bible tells us early on in the week's portion that the world was filled with Hamas. That's the actual word in the text. The word in Hebrew is Vatimalei haaretz Hamas. The world was filled with Hamas. That word has multiple explanations. The simplest term is that there was lawlessness in terms of explanation. The different commentaries give it a very specific meaning. Theft, immorality, you get the idea. But I think there's another idea there in that text. When the Bible's describing the environment, the atmosphere in which Noah is existing, before he builds the ark and goes into the ark and the world is effectively destroyed around him, other than himself, his family, and the animals that are brought into the ark, it could have simply just said that the people behaved in this and this and this manner. They did this wrong, they did that wrong, whatever it is. When the verse says that the world was filled with this, it's not just simply talking about the behaviors and the actions of the people. It's describing in full form what the world looks like, how the world feels. how someone who might drop into that moment would experience the world then. And so even if people aren't necessarily doing the evil things or behaving badly, for lack of a better term, because it's probably worse than that, the world is filled with it. It covers a layer of the soil. It goes that deep. It impacts the other life forms on Earth, the animals per se. It permeates deep. And I don't necessarily know that it means that everyone did certain behaviors, but perhaps it means that everybody forgave or allowed or excused certain actions and behaviors by a portion of the population and provided it with refuge, allowed it to persist, allowed it effectively then to metastasize without calling it out for what it was. Sounds familiar. It's what we're experiencing and what we're seeing and what we're feeling from certain portions of the Western world, let's say. Places that are, typically speaking, bastions of democracy and higher education, explaining away and excusing the actions, cheering it on, fomenting more of what happened here. That is the sentiment of that verse. And it can be deflating, demoralizing, demeaning, upsetting, painful, and it can bring you down. And it makes the darkness heavy. The greatest example of what took place just a couple of nights ago here is the story of this hospital in Gaza City, which, as I was sitting here at my desk doing work the other night, sort of in real time, almost experiencing this like it was a 24 episode with Kiefer Sutherland, as the story initially broke about this hospital being attacked and the immediate jump to charge that it was the state of Israel attacking a hospital and bombing a hospital, and the number of deaths and the amount of carnage and the amount of destruction and so on and so on and so on, and watching it unfold without evidence, without explanation, without proof, and then it's sort of turning very quickly within a few hours. It's hard. It's hard to feel like everybody is out to get you, that everybody is out to watch and witness and help you be defeated. To say that you're not deserving of a place to call home. To say that you don't have the right to exist. So many things in my head when that comes out. It spills over into hatred, into violence, into destruction. And it only creates this sort of greater cycle of terror. Not that each side is participating in terror. I don't think that for a second. But it just snowballs, rolls down that hill super fast. And that's how you feel. And it's darkness. The world that Noah lives in is a very dark place. There is literally no one else in the world, no one else in the world who buys what he's selling. Even when it starts raining. Even when it starts to overflow and starts to flood. He's a man alone with his family and the animals and an ark. And that's how it can feel sometimes here. A nation alone, a small nation. A blip on the screen, a rounding error in the population of the world for literally all time, basically. Hated, attempted to have been destroyed so many times. And so you get pulled in. So sort of watching the news sort of roll through Twitter feed or other social media, and it's like this one yelling at you, and the next one yelling at you, and the third one yelling at you, and the fourth, all telling you you're horrible and you're terrible and your country is the worst, and your atrocities and war crimes and all these things. And I'm not going to say that you start to believe it, but you definitely are impacted by it. And you want to just yell, scream, cry, throw something at the wall, say something dumb, something you might regret. And that's the power of that darkness. And it surrounds us. And so what I thought here to establish, and something that we've discussed before in Coaching with the Bible with respect to kindness and goodness and righteousness for that matter, in the space of being a good leader and how being a kind leader and a leader full of empathy and compassion, vulnerability, courage, is to come back to that. Because truth be told, as hard and as difficult and as bad as it feels sometimes to be here because of all the hate that surrounds us and the pain that lives inside us right now, there's a whole heck of a lot of light that's being spread. An unbelievable amount of kindness and goodness. You see it, you feel it, you're part of it. And so you get then the choice. You can call it the choice, as the Bible describes it at the end of Deuteronomy, to choose life or to choose death. You can term it to choose good versus choosing evil. You can term it choosing light over dark. But it is a choice. It is a choice. And you can choose to live in the light, and you can choose to live in the good, and you can choose to live in life, and you can choose to share that and spread that and bring that and exude that and have that sort of be your aura about you. It's a choice. So let me give you that example from the Bible, and we'll come back to ourselves personally. In the Bible, it says also, as Noah is building the ark, that he makes for himself something in Hebrew that's called a tzohar. It's not clear what that word is. He has to put a tzohar on the ark. Commentaries give it multiple meanings, and basically it comes down to two. Is it tzohar an illuminating stone, some sort of a stone that existed at the time that Noah could hang from the ceiling that would provide light within the ark itself? Or does that word mean a window? Later on, the Bible then does describe that there is a window in the ark, because that's by the place through which Noah sends out the dove ultimately to see if the water had receded far enough. But there's this disagreement that the commentaries bring down is, what is that thing? Is it a stone or is it a window? So for today, I'd like to have us, for the sake of coaching with the Bible, live inside the explanation that it's not a window, that it's an illuminating stone, and that it serves to provide light inside the ark for Noah, his wife, his sons, their wives, and all the animals that are there. And the premise of that is the idea that what God is providing for Noah is a microcosm of what the world is to be and not what the world was. And that what's going on outside the ark, all the bad and all the evil and all the death and destruction and that entire sort of world of being is no longer part of Noah's world. He shouldn't see it. He shouldn't look at it. He's not part of it. He is separate and distinct and removed from it. And that's by God's design. And what he has to do is focus inside the ark. This sounds more like a sermon than it does a podcast on coaching, but maybe we'll get there. By focusing in on what's going on inside the ark and his responsibility to his wife and to his sons and to their spouses and his obligations and him being accountable to all of the animals that exist inside the ark from a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, because this does take a long period of time in terms of feeding and take caring of them, that is light. That is good. That is servant leadership. That is kindness. That is righteousness. That is goodness. And if you're going to have to restart the world after such an event, that's the place you want to start from. Noah, God says, don't think for a second about everything that's happening outside. Don't listen to it. Don't look at it. Don't let it affect you. Focus on the inside. Focus on the light that's already inside. You have everything you need inside that ark to bring about an enormous amount of goodness and kindness into the world. All the talent and the skill to repair everything that is being destroyed and to start anew. It's a choice. For all the time that Noah is in the ark with the animals, he seems to do an exemplary job of taking care of everybody. He lives up to the task of being the captain of that ship. He chooses the light. He chooses life. He chooses kindness. He chooses goodness. Yes, he has no choice, but he chooses it and he does it. The world comes out of it. Humanity is restored. Covenants are established. And so that is that choice that we have, is the choice to choose the goodness and to choose that light similar to Noah. To stay off of the algorithm and to not let the different media sources that seem to start from a place of hate, anger, and seeking the demoralization and the humiliation and the shaming and the debasing of our people, and focusing on all the kindness and the goodness. 3 times in the last week, I had wanted to do a certain act of kindness in the community. Making sandwiches for soldiers one day. Delivering goods to some of the soldiers or to some of the communities that have been most deeply affected in the South. The reason I wasn't giving blood. The reason we weren't able to do those things, to fulfill those acts, is because too many people had volunteered. The line ahead of us to give blood, to donate blood, was 4 hours long. So many people had turned out. You just sort of pay attention to what's going on. Drive down the roads. The amount of kindness and goodness and righteousness, the amount of unity and community that is felt is overwhelming if you let it. And so it becomes a choice. We're going to listen to this very rabid and loud crowd that is saying all these horrible things about me and my family and my friends and my community and my country? Or am I going to drown it out with more kindness and righteousness and goodness? Not believe it. And to sort of be like Noah and to allow it to sort of exude from within out. Because when we allow that kindness and goodness to shine over us and to exude from us, and we get to share it with others, and they get to share it, and it becomes this share fest of kindness and goodness and righteousness. That's a lot of light, and that's something that you might want to be part of. So when we choose life and we choose kindness and righteousness and goodness, and we choose light, we can dispel a lot of dark. There's a famous quote from the first rabbi of Lubavitch, the Baal HaTanya, as he was called. Baal HaTanya has a very famous quote, which is basically the idea, I'm going to find it for you because I don't want to get it wrong, obviously. Make sure I get that right. Baal HaTanya has a statement which is very simple, very famous. He said it, I couldn't find the original source, but I've seen it quoted in a lot of places. A version of it is actually told in a story about Prime Minister Netanyahu when he arrived at the United Nations as an envoy for Israel, and he met with the last Lubavitch Rebbe. The statement is this: a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. A little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. And a lot of light dispels a whole heck of a lot of darkness. It just becomes the choice of choosing to be a person who lives inside the light. You take a hit, you take a blow, you get punched in the face, something happens, feels like that's what's happened around us, right? And then you decide, okay, that happened. Now what do I do? Do I allow that to be the determinant of me? Do I allow that to define who I am and what I am? Or do I say, no, you don't get to decide for me who I am and what I am and what we bring to the world. I decide that. I choose that. The truth be told, that even though it feels like the majority of the world thinks that way about us, first of all, who cares what the majority thinks? And second of all, it isn't true. I know what's true about me, my family, community, my town, my country, my people. And I know what's not true. I know what hate looks like. I know what lies sound like. And I get to choose myself, and I get to define myself and for ourselves what that's going to be. And so instead of living in the algorithm and allowing that to control the mind and how we think and how we behave and what we begin to believe, I'd rather it be shown an example, an action that's palpable and in front of me, everywhere around me, each and every day. From the youngest to the oldest. From the most fervent religious person to the most deeply secular person. All that division gone. An enormous sense of unity. This exceptional sense of a giant hug going on among the people. Which is amazing. And that's that exact thing that's happening with Noah inside that ark. Allowing the light to illuminate what's going on around him, allowing him to see the kindness and righteousness, the amazing things that are taking place inside that ark that he is responsible for. And not listening to what's going on around. Deaf ears to the rest of it. We can do that. To lead like that is an incredible way to lead. And to live like that is an incredible way to live. So, first and foremost, that choice is super important. We've talked about that choice before, but it's super important to choose. And to appreciate that we didn't, as that quote goes, we didn't get this far to only come this far. And there's more to do in this world. And then it's beginning to build with random acts of kindness, self-kindness. So random acts of kindness are just small things that you do for other people that they know about or they don't know about. No expectations of a return on that. We talked about that before last year when we talked about kindness. Self-kindness, appreciating that we deserve and we have the right and we should choose that goodness and kindness and righteousness for ourselves. And then to start with the smallest acts of kindness and the consistent acts of kindness. Earlier this week, my wife and I went to sort vegetables at a place called Leket, which is mostly known here in Israel as a food rescue organization. So we spent 3 hours sorting avocado and lettuce, I think a couple other things, peaches. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but at the end of a 3 hour shift, some 32,000 pounds of fruit and vegetable had been sorted by the entire group that we were with. It's a lot of food, serves a lot of people. It's a kindness. Yesterday we went to drive a car back to a soldier who is in the reserves, and his car is where he left it when he went in. Who knows when that was even, and brought the vehicle back to where it needed to be. Doesn't sound like a big kindness, but it is a kindness. It is something. It's something to really appreciate that counts. Giving blood obviously is one of those things. Delivering food and supplies. Last week I had the opportunity to go down to the south to visit with one of the communities that had been incredibly impacted by the atrocity and terror act of Hamas, and just be with them. Share candy with the kids, some words of strength, and just know that there's somebody who cares. Visiting with some of the soldiers in some of the different bases, bringing them some supplies, just being around them. That camaraderie, that sense that we belong together, we trust each other, we're there for each other, we're family, we're community, we're one nation. That is hard to beat. And so the first thing, as I said, is some sort of random acts of kindness on a consistent basis. I think it's super good. Some kind of random act of self-kindness, doing something for yourself. Treat yourself right, treat yourself well, be kind to yourself. And then consistently doing other acts of goodness and righteousness and kindness for others is something that then creates the spread. That light that sort of begins within, that starts to show on the outside, that can then spread to some others, and then it sort of goes from there. That makes an enormously bright light around you and shows for who you are, actually. And not what other people say about you, what other people think about you. It doesn't matter one lick. And so that's where we are this week. After a lot of pain and a lot of anger and a lot of sadness and tears and down and just being in that pit. And yes, the last couple of days sort of felt that very much so. And so listening to my wife, as I try to do, because I think it's good advice generally, but in my case it's always sort of worked out well for me, to not steep myself and stew inside the hatred, but rather to focus in on the light. And as always, we end with a quote, Coaching with the Bible. I do think we can all do this. I do think there's a lot of opportunity for us to bring more light into the world and to really focus in on it and to really build on it and then to create and to build on top of that. It should not have had to come through tragedy and atrocity and just the most awful and horrific crime. It's not even the right word. It was committed against my people. We don't ask why. We do ask what then do we do. So here's that quote. This is a quote from Wayne Dyer, who I've mentioned multiple times in the course of Coaching with the Bible. He is the source of one of my favorite quotes of all time. Is that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, but that's not the quote of the day. Wayne Dyer is an early version of what I would call an executive coach. But he said the following: not only do you become what you think about, but the world also becomes what you think about. Those who think that the world is a dark place are blind to the light that might illuminate their lives. Those who see the light of the world View the dark spots as merely potential light. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week. I hope you remain uplifted, excited, happy, living inside the light, bringing joy and goodness and kindness and righteousness to all people around you, everywhere they may be. And I hope you begin to permeate the rest of the world with it. Have a great, great week.